In this session, I'd like to focus upon the First Commandment, which reads in Exodus, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, there are actually two versions of the Ten Commandments. The one in Exodus, from which I just read, and another in Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verses 5 through 21. Which adds some commentary to some of the commandments, though they're essentially the same in terms of what it is they command. These commandments are delivered to the people of Israel after Moses leads them to Mount Sinai, where he had first encountered God in the burning bush. These laws are meant to establish a basic philosophical framework upon which a larger body of laws could be founded. That larger body of laws would be known as the Mosaic Law. While the name would seem to credit all of them to Moses, it's likely that many of them were written after his time, but were seen as carrying on his works and traditions. The title of this message is First Things First. The commandment we're focusing on does not say, you shall have no other gods, or there are no other gods. It says, you shall have no other gods before me. And that's rather significant because you see, the early Hebrews were not what we think of today as monotheists. In other words, people who believe there is only one God. In their time, they were what biblical scholars call henotheists. That's a belief or worship of one God without denying the possibility of others. It's sort of like saying, yeah, those other gods exist, but this God is our God. This God is the most important God. In fact, one of the names that God has in the Old Testament is Elohim, which literally translates as the God of gods. It meant this is the God who is above all the other gods. Not that the other gods don't exist, merely that this God is supreme above them and the one to whom we should offer our worship and allegiance. Actually, it took about 7 centuries for the prophets to bring the Hebrew people to genuine monotheism. It was a long slog. And at this point, when the Ten Commandments were written, the early Israelites lived in a world that they saw as chock full of gods. Egypt had bunches of gods who were all just fine with the Hebrews being enslaved for hundreds of years. But then appears this one mysterious God, the God of the Hebrew people, the God who is known by this name that was considered and still is considered by the Jewish people the most holy, supreme, and transcendent of all names, and that is Yahweh, often been mistranslated over the centuries as Jehovah, but Yahweh, which means I am who I am. Actually means more than that, but we'll get into that at a later time. You rarely see the entire commandment, written down. Lots of people have copies of the Ten Commandments hanging on their walls somewhere, but they usually exclude that first sentence. And it's an important sentence, it's an important statement. It says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, when I shared that once with a Sunday school class of junior high age kids, one girl kind of snorted and went, why is that the first commandment? That sounds like a Sunday school rule. And indeed, a lot of people do not think that that is the first commandment. If you ask folks, they'll usually say it must be something like, thou shalt not kill. I've noted often that the only time you ever hear people say thou shalt is when they're quoting one of the commandments. Well, there's a reason why that is the very first commandment, and it's a very practical one. The 20th century theologian Paul Tillich noted that from a very practical standpoint, our God is essentially whatever our ultimate concern in life is. Whatever we build our lives around is what we actually worship, no matter what we may claim to worship. The God we choose shapes our lives. Our ultimate concern is why we get up in the morning and suck oxygen. It is the thing around which we build our lives. It is our central ultimate concern. I was conducting a Bible study with a group of women from a drug rehab center that was right across the street from the church I was serving. Now, I got to tell you, I love doing Bible studies with drug addicts and prisoners because they can't pretend like their lives are working out. They are very honest and forthright, and that's refreshing. And the first thing I did in this study was deal with the Ten Commandments, and I invited them to name the first commandment. And as is almost always the case, they named several other commandments and never did come up with, "You shall have no other gods before me." And they too wondered, why on earth is that the first commandment? Why isn't "you shouldn't kill" more important? So I shared with them this idea has that our God practical standpoint is whatever our ultimate concern is. And I said, if you define your God in that way, what has been your ultimate concern for the last few years? And every one of them just sort of went, well, crack, meth, heroin, something like that. And so I asked them, okay, I think that's a pretty fair statement. So tell me, what did you sacrifice in the service of your God? Did you ever lie? Oh, yeah, I lied a lot. Did you ever steal? Yeah, stole all the time. Did you ever sell your body for the drug? And virtually all of them had done so at some point or another, in some way or another. I said, did you ever dishonor your parents? Did you ever cause alienation with your family and disappoint them, use them, betray them? Oh, yeah, did that. I said, I won't ask you if you murdered anybody, but could you have gotten behind the wheel while just really high and possibly have crashed your car into a van full of kids and maybe only didn't do so by the grace of God? And yeah, they admitted that was true. They could have killed. So I said, so you broke all those commandments because you chose the wrong God. Suddenly, it became clear why that is the first commandment. And asked them, does your God, the God you've been worshiping, promise you power and freedom or just another kind of slavery? Very often, people get addicted to drugs or some kind of behavior because they think it's going to make them happy, they think it's going to give them power, they think it's going to make them free, only to discover that it enslaves them. But at the beginning of that commandment, it says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of slavery. What we all need to do is to find and worship the right God. In Alcoholics Anonymous and the other 12-step programs, the first step is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves would restore us to sanity. That's the first step toward being healed, toward regaining your life, is to admit that you have given yourself to the wrong God. And then the next step is to find the God that will save you, that higher power that will lead you to sanity. So, what is the saving power that liberates us from the world's false gods? Well, again, the God of Moses says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And it wasn't because they'd done anything to merit it. They hadn't done anything to deserve it. They weren't especially wonderful or great or moral or powerful or noteworthy. In Deuteronomy, it says, the Lord did not set his affection on you and choose you because you were more numerous than other peoples. For you were the fewest of all peoples. The prophets kept saying over and over again, God didn't choose us because we were great, but precisely because we were small and, in the eyes of much of the world, worthless except as free labor. We were nobodies. We were powerless. We were helpless. We were hopeless. And Jesus would always reach out to those who were left out, stepped over, and broken down. He stood up for them. This, we are told, is the true God, the God whose grace brings freedom and not a different kind of slavery. So, first things first, choose your God. Find the God who's going to bring you to freedom and hope. This is the God of the First Commandment and why that commandment is so important.